Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the webinar organized by the Ladies College All Girls Association. The webinar is the second in a series of webinars that we're hoping to host over the upcoming months. The past year, as we all know, has forced us all to adopt new behaviors and adapt to new challenges. And we've seen a lot written about what we as adults can do to cope and the new sort of challenges that we are facing as adults. But what we tend to forget is that our children are also facing these new challenges. They're also facing new sorts of behaviors that they have to adopt. They're also facing new environments that they need to adapt to. For example, they can't go out to play as freely as they used to. They now have to spend extended hours in front of computers studying. They can't meet their friends as much as they used to. And all of these actually is taking a toll on our children. And we may not even realize that because they don't voice it in the way that we do. Right? Because these impacts on them come out in the form of new behaviors. And as parents and as adults, it's very easy for us to put these down as our kids just being naughty or not acting the way that we want them to do. But I mean, but what this webinar is about is that there's actually a lot more to it, right? So both Ishanthi Perera and Vanessa Bibile, who are all girls and consultants in children's behavior, will now take us through the various ways in which children and adults have been affected by the pandemic. Right? Vanessa will speak first and will focus on the impact that on mental health that the COVID-19 pandemic has had. And Ishanthi will take over thereafter and speak on how these mental impacts have manifested themselves in our children, specifically through new behaviors, and how we need to address these behaviors. So they'll each speak for roughly 20 minutes each, and thereafter we'll open the forum up for Q&A questions for about 15 minutes. Before I hand the forum over to Vanessa and give you an introduction, a brief introduction to her, a few housekeeping rules. One is we ask that all of you mute your mics if it already hasn't been done by the host, just so that we avoid any background noise. Second is, during the question and answer session, if you wish to ask questions anonymously, we've arranged for that to be done. All you need to do is type out your question in the chat box that's on the right-hand side of your screen. And before you send it, select either Ishanthi Perera, Vanessa Bibile, or the LCOG. So the questions will actually only go to one of those people who you have selected. All right. Before I hand it over to Vanessa, a brief introduction. Vanessa is an old girl of Ladies College, and she is the consultant of special education needs for all of the Lyceum International Schools. She has been working in the field of education for 10 years as a consultant, a trainer, and a lecturer in psychology and education. She completed her higher studies in Scotland, where she obtained a master's in psychology and a master's in child development, after which she worked in the UK in early years education and social services. Thereafter, after she returned to Sri Lanka, she joined the education sector, focusing on intervention methods for children with special needs, children who struggle with learning difficulties, and children who struggle with emotional difficulties. Vanessa has worked with children of all ages, from children as young as 6 months to children as old as 16 years, and she believes in the individual potential that is unique to each and every child. So that's a little bit about Vanessa, and I'm now going to hand the forum over to her. Yeah, Vanessa.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. First and foremost, I would like to thank the OGA of Ladies College for this opportunity and for organizing this talk on such an important and prevalent topic, parenting during a pandemic. Ishanthi and I have tried to adapt our concepts and techniques that we'll be introducing to suit a wide audience, because we are aware that there might be parents here who are at different stages in their parenting journey. So whether you are a parent of a baby, a toddler, a school-going child, or a teenager, we hope that these sessions will give you fresh insight. Now, a picture paints 1,000 words. And when I was preparing for this, I Googled some images on parenting during a pandemic. And this gives us a glimpse of what it is like. Actually, this is reality to many of us here. You might be scheduling a Zoom meeting and wondering how to keep your kids entertained. You might be powering through those online classes each and every day, wondering how to keep your kids motivated, how to keep them seated still. You might be cooking with one hand, carrying your baby with the other. You might have a teenager in the house who is locked up in the room on the phone the whole day, and you're worried about them. And before we move on to the parenting aspect, it's first, I just first want to take a few moments to look at how the pandemic is affecting us as parents. Now, if you have been feeling agitated and irritable, if you find yourself overreacting to situations with your kids, with your family at home, if you find yourself unable to concentrate on something that you have to do, if you're feeling more tired and just an overwhelming sense of exhaustion and feeling overwhelmed, you are not alone. I know I am here talking to you, but I myself, I'm a mom, and there have been days when I have overreacted. There have been days when I have got upset easily or felt more irritable. And I'm sure all of us here can identify with one or more of these feelings and behaviors. So if we look at what the COVID-19 has, how it has affected us, we've never faced a global pandemic before, and we were not prepared for it. We didn't actually expect the full scale of its effect on our lives and our families. And it doesn't have, well, it hasn't only affected us in one way. In fact, as you can see on your screen, there are so many areas that it has affected us. It has affected our mental health. And this has brought about, added stress and worry over the future, our children's education, fear of falling ill, finances. That's a big concern for many of us here. It has brought about, well, changes to our physical well-being as well, due to fatigue, lack of exercise, lack of relaxation. I'm sure some of us here are even skipping meals so that we can get things done. It's affecting our family and our daily routine. When we are under lockdown, we are there with each other every day, all the time. And there is dynamics within relationships that we have to manage. There's a fear, a frustration in managing this, in juggling, I would say juggling, the daily routines, the responsibilities at work and at home, homeschooling, and there seems to be this loss of time. And it's also affected our social lives. And some of us might be actually feeling lonely and sad because we feel distanced from our friends and people we used to go out to meet. And this is why we have some of these feelings and behaviors that keep coming up. These feelings of agitation and distraction and difficulty to relax like we used to. And it is so important to understand this, to identify this, because it doesn't only affect us within, it actually affects our parenting and ultimately our relationships with our kids. So it's so important to understand that COVID has affected us in so many different areas. And this is sometimes how, this is what the weight of it can make us feel like. Regarding our children, they have also had to adapt to so many changes, and they were also, they've also had to adapt to it very quickly. It wasn't a gradual change, they didn't transition into online learning little by little. No, it was an immediate change, sometimes within days. And from just learning with their friends and their teachers and having that contact, today they're sitting behind a screen. And hence, it's not only anxiety and depression that this can add to their lives. It's just that sense of disappointment. You know, schools keep starting and closing. They keep waiting to see their friends. They keep asking to see their friends. They're unable to celebrate their birthday parties like they used to. And COVID-19 has hence thrown us into a deep end. That's what it feels like, right? It feels like it has just thrown you into a deep end. I know many of us here are looking forward to some kind of normalcy. And the reality is that we don't know when that's going to happen and how that's going to happen. But I would like to bring in a little bit of perspective here. I really believe in the power of perspective. And when you're thrown in a deep end, you've got two options, right? You can learn to swim or you can drown. Sometimes that's what it feels like. I know it. The pressure, keeps pulling you down. But when you are thrown into a deep end, and when you want to learn to swim, I want to emphasize on that word learn here, because it's important to see it as an opportunity. Here is an opportunity. So we sometimes see it as problems and challenges, but they provide opportunities. And it's also a training wheel to learn a new approach, to learn new strategies and techniques on how to manage situations at home. And it's not only a training wheel for us as parents, it's also a training wheel for our children, because I know that we always want to protect our children from disappointments, right? We want to protect them, we want to prevent them. And unfortunately, COVID-19 has presented lots of disappointments in our children's lives, and we are unable to always protect them. And that's the reality. And it is, I would say, instead, let's see this as an opportunity to help them face the disappointments and navigate through it. Because even as adults, children need to know how to face a disappointment, how to persevere through a disappointment, how to face it with strength, and how to overcome it. And these are some of the skills that we can teach our children now using this opportunity of the global pandemic. So I would like to introduce to you an approach in parenting. It's called the reflective parent. And it stems from the field of psychoanalysis. If you have heard of Sigmund Freud, he was a pioneer of psychoanalysis. And what the reflective parent focuses on is connecting behavior with the underlying mental state. So making sense of behavior through the lens of our mental experiences. So just like this iceberg, as you can see the picture of the iceberg, just as it shows, when we look at behavior, we only see what is on the surface, right? We see the fussing child, we see the crying child, we see the child with the tantrum, we see those behaviors. But actually, it is connected to a lot of other aspects, our thoughts, our emotions that come from within. And when we react, the way we react, what we say, what is on our facial expressions, what we do is what the child sees. The child is not really aware of how tired we are, how stressed we are, how many things we're thinking about. The child is not really aware of that, right? So this is what reflective parenting focuses on. Making sense of our behavior, our child's behavior, through the lens of understanding what is going on within, what is going on beneath the surface. And the focus of reflective parenting is on our relationships to our children. So I will give you an example. Just yesterday, my little one was fussing, and after about 45 minutes, it began to get to me. And my husband asked the all-important question, why do you think he's fussing like this? And that question made me stop and think, why is he fussing like this? And just by pausing for a moment, I remembered that he hadn't had his afternoon nap and he was really tired. And immediately it changed my attitude towards my son, right? And this is what reflective parenting does. This is what our mental experiences are. It's our thoughts, it's our expectations, which is a big one, and it's our emotions and feelings. And we just looked at how the COVID pandemic has been making us feel like. So I'm just going to give you four methods actually. I don't want to call it methods. I would like to call it habits, right? The push, pause, and slow down and be present in the moment. These are the first two habits. Now you might be thinking, Vanessa, what are you talking about? We just spoke about how much I have to juggle, and now you're asking me to push, pause, and slow down. What are you talking about, right? So I'm going to give you two contexts. The first context is difficult behavior. When you are faced with difficult behavior that you really don't appreciate by your child, take stock. First of all, push pause. Why do we push pause? Why do we take a moment to pause? This allows us to take ourselves out of that juggling mentality, like I have to do this and I got this in my head and I got this on my list. It takes us out of that juggling mentality and it tunes us into what our child is trying to communicate to us. It's so important, even at that moment where you think, right now, am I feeling angry? Am I feeling impatient? That helps you adjust to the way you communicate to your child. So tuning into your moment, tuning in, focusing on what your child is trying to say, because that is priority. The next two points is using words to help your child. Sorry, I have to go back to the previous point. I forgot something, right? The second context that I was going to talk to you about is push pause for a time slot each day just to be present and spending time with your kids. This is such a simple but such an effective method. Now, the time slot, some of us, it can be half an hour, some of us, it can be 10 minutes. It doesn't matter. That doesn't matter. Quantity, it's not about quantity, it's about quality. And to be present in the moment means that sometimes we need to take away the distraction. We need to put that into another room, whether it is our laptop, our phones, because right now with all the juggle, some of the behavior that you might be observing is your child trying to grab your attention, or your child trying to say, Mommy, I just want your time with me. So for me, my time with my son is generally in the nights, bedtime, where we read books together. It's about 10 minutes and he loves it. I keep my phone out and I am just being present in the moment, being mindful, tuning into him. For some of us, it might be having movie night with our kids, might be having a games night, but don't use movie night as an example, as an opportunity to sit with your laptop to check an email. No, it's being present with your children. And using words. This is so, sorry, let me go back. Using words to helping children identify what they're feeling. I'm sure Ishanthi will be going into this more. So it's, again, very simple, very effective, but it's being very conscious about what we're trying to achieve here, because you are using this opportunity to empathize with your child. If we don't empathize with what our children are feeling, it becomes a power struggle, right? It's like, you listen to me, I'm your parent, you listen to me. If you don't listen to me, you're going to get punished. That's a power struggle. That's not going to change anything, right? So instead of that, what we do is, and I've started this with my 3-year-old, it's like, darling, are you feeling sad? Why are you feeling sad? And immediately a communication begins, a communication starts, a connection starts. So identifying with what they're feeling. Are you feeling bored? Does online classes make you feel bored? And at that moment, we stop talking at them. Because can they tell you that they're feeling bored? Do they have the freedom to say, Mama, I just don't like that class. I feel bored. When we talk at them, it would be something like, you can't feel bored, but nonsense. How can you feel bored? Immediately, talking at them will shut that communication. So I think this is something as adults, we just have to be so conscious about, just to listen. Because we tell, right? We're telling them what to do, how to do it, when to do it. But when they open the communication channel with us, we actually need to take a step back and listen without interrupting and listen without judging. And this is a way of showing empathy, showing understanding. Okay, I get what you're feeling. What are the options? What shall we do about it? The reflective parent is also very mindful of expectations. And these expectations we can put on ourselves and our children. So when I want you to think about your expectations this evening, think of three main things, okay? So if you're thinking about yourself, are your expectations to yourself, the expectations you put on yourself, are they realistic? Are they flexible? We are in a global pandemic situation. We are under lockdown. Are you still trying to run things perfectly? Because some days that might be unrealistic. It might not be possible. And unrealistic expectations just add in more pressure. And you can fall under the weight of that pressure. Even your kids can fall under the weight of that pressure. Are your expectations flexible? COVID-19 has shown us how much we need to adapt, how much our kids have had to adapt to. And again, we can't be always rigid every day. It's so important to understand where we are at on those days. The third point here says, are your expectations in tune with your child's age and level? This is very important also for homeschooling, because some younger children are unable to sit at the screen for long. They're unable to pay attention for long. And that's their age and level. And the moment we shout, when we fight with them to sit still and listen, they're not going to listen. Because they feel stressed, they feel fed up, they won't be concentrating on the lesson. So it's really important to understand your child's age and level, and adapt your expectations accordingly. This is something that we use. Finally, this is my last point. This is something that we use as special educators, the individual child, because we meet so many different children, different abilities, different cognitive profiles. And parents who are here with 2 and 3 kids, it is so important to understand and appreciate and value the uniqueness of each child in your family. They will have a unique personality, they will have a unique strengths, they will have unique interests. Some of them will be fantastic readers, some will be more practical learners. And we need to value them accordingly, according to their uniqueness. So parents, refrain from comparing your children to their siblings and cousins and neighbors, saying things like, look at your brother, he can sit in front of the computer for so long, why can't you sit, right? Again, what you're going to be doing is you're going to be demoralizing the child, and that will make him not want to sit in front of that class, right? So we need to refrain from comparing. And what you need to do is acknowledge their effort, no matter how small, no matter how small. You can say things like, I see that you've sat for your English class today. Well done. I appreciate that. Or that makes me really happy. I can see that you've arranged your bed today. well done. Because often what we do acknowledge is the negative behavior. Very rarely do we actually acknowledge. And we also acknowledge, we tend to acknowledge the end result. Oh, you got 80 for your exam. Oh, you got 60 for your exam. What happened there? Do we ever acknowledge the effort that the child has put in? And that's something that is very powerful, because the moment you start appreciating their efforts, they realize that you see it and you value it, and they begin to put in more effort, because those words matter to them a lot. So acknowledge, tell them, I see that, I see that, I appreciate it. So this is the end of my talk. You know, we are very concerned about our children's well-being, but the good news is that us parents play a vital role in their journey during this season. Reflective parenting is about approaching our children with compassion, with understanding, with empathy. And the main focus is keeping our relationships with them intact. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Vanessa. That was extremely informative, and I certainly learned a lot as a parent. Ishanthi will take over now, but before I hand it over to her, I'd just like to do a brief introduction. Ishanthi is also an old girl of LC like Vanessa, and she has a master's in applied disability studies, specializing in applied behavior analysis from the University of Brock, Canada, and an honors BSc in psychology, specializing in exceptionality in human learning from the University of Toronto. She holds over 15 years experience in applied behavior analysis and working with special needs populations. Ishanthi is also certified in picture exchange communication systems, applied suicide intervention skills training, and mental health first aid. And she currently conducts assessments for skills development, stress and anxiety management, and education using current and up-to-date assessment tools. Ishanthi works both as a consultant behavior analysis for the RCA group of hospitals and as a consultant behavior therapist for the ABC School of Learning. At ABC, she is also the head of the special needs department. In addition, she also acts as a consultant for various schools and educational institutions. With that brief introduction, I now hand the forum over to Ishanthi.
Thank you, Niru, for the lovely introduction, and thank you to the OGA for inviting me to speak. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. So, behavior analysis is probably something many of you haven't heard of. The field of behavior analysis is quite vast and touches upon many areas. But for the purpose of this webinar, I will focus mainly on challenging behavior during the COVID-19 pandemic and what we can do to cope. So parenting during a pandemic. The COVID-19 pandemic and lockdown has brought about a sense of fear, anxiety, and depression around the globe. This phenomena has led to short-term as well as long-term psychosocial and mental health implications for everyone, including children. Children, unless they are taught, they're not very good at understanding and verbalizing their emotions. Some of them struggle with what we call proper functional communication, so meaningful communication. These children respond to big emotions like fear, sadness, and even happiness through behavior. So let's look at some of these behaviors. So that's now it's really important to note that not all children and teens respond to stress in the same way. But here are some common changes that we can watch for. Maybe you've seen this in your children, maybe you've not, but here's a list. Excessive crying or fussiness in younger children, separation anxiety. So this means the previous slide. There you go. So excessive crying or fussiness in younger children, separation anxiety. So this is not wanting mom to leave the room, not wanting dad to leave the room, things like that. Returning to behaviors they have outgrown. So for example, toileting accidents, bedwetting, thumb sucking, and so on. Excessive fear, worry, or sadness. nail biting, hair biting, biting on clothing, skin picking, and so on. Changes in eating or sleeping habits, more frequent and intense tantrums in younger and older children, excessive irritability and moodiness in older children, poor school performance or avoiding school altogether. This, of course, in this scenario, it would be online school. Difficulties with attention, concentration, and motivation. Avoidance of activities enjoyed in the past. Unexplained headaches or body aches. Screen addiction. Hoarding behavior. And use of alcohol, tobacco, or other drugs. If you have noticed this kind of behavior in your child or children you interact with, it's important to get an understanding of what might be bothering them. So the next slide, we'll try and get an understanding of what's going on here. Now, there are many simple and complex reasons as to why we behave, but today I'm going to try and keep this pandemic related. So COVID-19 related research indicates that children engage in challenging behaviors for a few reasons. So as you can see in that, the picture that's on the screen, the first one, of course, is their mental health. So the previous panelists spoke about this, Vanessa spoke about it as well. We are talking about things like anxiety, depression, fear, grief, these big complex emotions and the inability to understand and cope with these emotions. The second one would be environmental issues. Now, if you think about our kids, the three main environments for our children are home, school, and their community, right? Now, all three things have changed because of this pandemic. For changes in the home, we are looking at things like family discord, domestic violence, economic issues, inability to engage in activities outside the home, reduced social connections, boredom, and so on. For changes in the school, the main reason, of course, would be the lack of school, right? School closure, break in routine, no access to peer groups, reduced social attention from close circles. So children who usually get attention from being a sportsman or a sportswoman wouldn't get that regular attention. Someone who's really great at singing and who's a star in the choir wouldn't get attention from where they used to get it from. So this also has really affected them. When we're talking about the outside environment, the community, every news channel focuses on COVID-19, on the increasing cases of patients, on the death rate, on the dire economic issues everyone is facing, curfews, lockdown, forced quarantine. I mean, these are major issues, but when you're subjected to this every day, all the time, it really starts changing the way you think, right? So the next one, of course, and this is more relevant to little children, they have an underdeveloped prefrontal cortex. The front of their brain, the part that's responsible for reasoning, it's not developed as much as it would be in an older child. So their reasoning skills, their inability to process everything they see and hear, these things affect the way they filter information. This causes fear and anxiety about what's happening around them. The next one is increased attention-seeking behavior. So right now, children need more attention from their parents as access to teachers, other caregivers, other peer groups. These things are no longer available to them. So that quota of attention that they need, they now try to get that only from the parent. And the last one, of course, the last main one rather, is increased need for control. So a lot of kids crave control because they feel that a lot of other things in their life are out of control, right? So let's move on to the next slide, please. So helping children cope during these challenging times. So now we learned about, what might be bringing about these behaviors. Here are some tips and strategies that you can use to try and get things under control. The first one is safety and security. Now, as the previous panelists discussed, stress, anxiety, and depression are on the rise during this pandemic. Adults are struggling to cope. Parents are feeling burnt out. Stress and tensions are high inside households. This is a huge factor in children's maladaptive behavior. Their stress levels, psychosocial health, their sense of safety and security are most affected when they experience family discord. right? But fights are going to happen. Arguments will take place. So try and control your words and your volume. Try and control your body during arguments. Try and learn more productive ways of communicating with your partner, with your children, with your parents, whoever it is that you're having these arguments with. Get help. Learn to walk away from arguments if it's not an important one, and try not to argue in front of your children, right? Many families have experienced job loss and reduced wages due to this pandemic. Now, younger children may not realize or understand the implications, but studies have shown that older children are very much affected by economic insecurity, changing socioeconomic status, and these hushed conversations about job loss and wage cuts. So one way that we can tackle this is to have an open family discussion about what's happening. And as a family, come up with ideas to cut costs. Focus on the positives that, this won't be forever, just until things get under control. The next one is access to information. Limit your family's exposure to news coverage of COVID-19 and its implications. Children may misinterpret what they hear and can be frightened about something that they don't understand. Instead, talk about the facts. Give them proper, concise information in a way your child will understand, and focus on preventative measures and how to stay safe. My next point is positive attention, and Vanessa also talked about this a little bit. Our kids need our attention and support now more than ever. And remember, right now, the only place your child can get positive attention from is you. They don't have access to their friends, their teachers, their peer groups. They only have you. So pay attention to all the good things they do, no matter how small, and praise them for it. Acknowledge when your child listens to you and follows instructions. Ignore the minor challenging behaviors or redirect them to something else. It's a difficult time, right? So if something small is happening, don't harp on it. With consistency, your child will start to learn more positive ways to get your attention. Create activities like family time, game nights, and so on to get the family together. And when you get together, try not to talk about someone's problem behavior or poor academics or pick on a family member. Try and keep this time light and positive and inviting. A little bit like the push pause concept that Vanessa talked about, right? You stop, you really be in the moment, right? But just a note of caution. Remember, our kids need our attention. And if we are not giving them any, they will seek it from somewhere else. And with more access to technology, we need to be mindful with who they are talking to and who they're interacting with. So don't let them replace you with something that's not going to be very positive. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the next point, of course, in how to cope would be schedules. Schedules are really important. They help us maintain a consistent routine. They also help children as it gives them a sense of predictability and a sense of security. We can allow our child to have some control within these schedules as well. For families with young children, it's important to note that a grown-up needs to supervise and train the child to follow it. Just because you have a schedule, a 3 or 6-year-old is not going to go and follow it. They need someone to help them understand what they're supposed to do. For little children who don't have proper play skills, include closed-ended activities and age-appropriate chores in this schedule. For families with older children, talk to your child before making a schedule. Listen to their ideas and incorporate their own activities. Older kids can have a token reward system built into their schedule as well, so that they can earn rewards, which they can put towards, let's say, extra screen time or to play an online game and so on. As discussed before, time for family activities, as well as time to exercise. Exercise is important during these stressful times. It helps us get active and it helps us elevate our mood as well. The next point is functional communication, which I think is very important. Functional communication is important actually no matter how old you are. Teach your child to express themselves in a functional and appropriate manner. Teach them by practicing and engaging in functional and respectful communication yourself, with your spouse, with your parents, with your children, with your co-workers. When they see you practicing it, they will see the value in it and they will practice it as well. Now, due to this pandemic, children have had to miss significant life events. They experience stress and worry. They feel insecure. They're cut off from their friends. The list is endless. So it's very important to teach children to express themselves, to name their emotions, to describe what they're feeling, and to identify their needs. It is also important to teach them healthy negotiations so that they can get some degree of control in a respectful and appropriate way. For older children, adolescence is a time for exploring interests and molding your image and things like that. Adolescents living through this pandemic have missed a lot of these opportunities. So their pent-up emotions and frustrations need healthy outlets. Functional communication and healthy self-expression is very important for this age group. And of course, the next point that we're going to go into is healthy self-expression. Help your child discover new interests during this time. Help them find healthy ways to use up their energy and let out their frustrations. Some examples are things like drawing, cooking, building things, exercising, and so on. Technology and online safety. Now, technology is a fairly large and complicated topic. Technology is here to stay. So we may as well learn how to use it wisely. Schedule screen time. Don't allow free access. Use first, then strategies to make it a reward. Use technology productively. Allow children to use technology to connect with family and friends. Encourage video calls or over texting. Don't cut them off from their peer groups and their friends. This is the time when they really need them. TV shows and games are helpful for social skills. Kids congregate according to interest. So what kids have most in common is what they watch and what they play with. So cutting off all TV and games won't be helping them at all, especially when they have to go back to school and navigate social relationships. So have a conversation with them about what shows can be watched and, sync group online games within a schedule so that, that your kids do get time to access this screen for leisure activities, right? Technology also has its ugly side. Cyberbullying is on the rise, and there are many corrupt individuals lying in wait in cyberspace to lure children into violence, pornography, gambling, and drugs. So parents, do keep an eye on what your child is accessing. There are many apps and tools available online to do this. The next slide, please. Coping with online school. I wonder whether many of the parents here joined in just for this slide, right? One of the greatest challenges our children have had to face is shifting their education to an online platform within a period of weeks. So here are some tips that we as parents can do to help our child with online school. Create a schedule. Be consistent and stick to it. So if it's waking up at 7 o'clock, let's wake up at 7 o'clock. It's not 7:15 on some days. Oh no, the class started. Hurry up and not that. It's 7 o'clock, wake up at 7 o'clock, get yourself dressed, take a wash, have your breakfast, stick to a good routine. Set up a place in your home where your child can focus on schoolwork, a large enough desk, a quiet corner. Provide a headset to reduce distractions if you need to. Treat online school like real school. Encourage your child to pay attention in class, to write down notes, to interact with the teacher, to get their homework done. Your attitude and support towards online school really matters because it sets the tone for your child's attitude towards online school. Show respect for teachers. Don't belittle them or undermine them in front of your child. Instead, verbally show appreciation so that your child will change their attitude and mindset about respecting their teachers virtually. And also remember, show respect for education and online learning. Place importance on the quizzes and projects your child gets. Get involved and help make online school interesting and fun for them. So some tips are, for little kids, play games like school or teacher game. Get your child to go over what they learned in class and in their online class, and make it fun through play. You be the student, they are the teacher, they are teaching you, right? For your child, if your child enjoys spending time online and your childcare options are limited, encourage them to make PowerPoint presentations on topics of interest, or for them to create a quiz for you. For older kids, ask them to summarize into a paragraph, or to write down 3 points per topic or per subject in order to get TV time or internet time. This way you can kind of ensure that they've also gone over some of the content in order for them to get what they want. Next slide, please. The acting out child, right? What should you do? Sometimes, despite our best efforts, our kids still have tantrums. So here are a few tips that you can follow to get the situation under control. For little kids, one person deal with the situation. Remove the audience. So grandparents, siblings, maid, get them all out of that room. Just one person deal with it. Give time and space for the child to calm down. As a parent, you need to stay calm. Do not add to the chaos by scolding the child and getting upset yourself. Remember, your child is still learning to handle these big emotions. So we need to teach them how to do this. When the child is starting to calm down, speak to them gently. Show them on a schedule when they can have their preferred activity again, if that's what they were crying about, and how they can earn it. Encourage your child to complete the task that elicited the tantrum, because you don't want them to think that, oh, I can just cry and get away with this, right? So get them to go back and do whatever it is that started this tantrum, but you can always reduce the task demand. So if they cried about, let's say, they didn't want to clean up their toys, you can say, look, there are 50 blocks here. Amma is going to put in 40 of them. You just need to put in 10, something like that, right? Don't let them get away with not doing anything at all. As a parent, we also need to think, was this expectation too big for the child? Was the child just completely unable to even start or carry it out? Praise for follow through. If your child is doing it, praise them. At the end of the day, discuss what happened and teach them alternative ways to get their message across. So this is what we call functional communication, right? If it was too difficult, say you're allowed to say, Amma, it was too hard for me, right? If you were too tired, you can say, Tata, I need a break, right? Teach them functional communication. Next slide, please. The acting out adolescent, right? For older kids, always remember that you are the parent. Your child still doesn't know how to manage their emotion. So don't lose your cool. If the situation is tense and your child is being very verbally and physically aggressive, don't engage or escalate the situation. Instead, try and diffuse the situation. Tell them to take a break. They can go to the garden, they can go to their room, provided that there is no device waiting for them, right? Much later, when things are calm and your child is willing to listen, talk about what happened. Remember functional communication and healthy negotiations. Teach your child to use these. Be supportive and help them problem solve and do damage control. Make your expectations and consequences very clear and stick to it. And make your child understand that positive and negative consequences are in their control. If expectations are too hard, talk to them and make adjustments. School closure is really hard on teens, so make allowances. Let the small things slide. Talk about how they're feeling and ask how you can help. Be very mindful to spend quality time together, building trust and good relationships when tantrums are not happening. But parents do remember, never ignore serious misbehavior or potentially harmful behavior, such as physical aggression, destructive behavior, or suicidal ideation. If you are experiencing these, please connect with a professional and get help. Next slide, please. So after this webinar, I think the OJ will be sending a handout with some studies where you parents can read and get more information about these topics. Next slide, please. So here's just a summary of, what we went over. We went over identifying challenging behavior. So what would be considered a challenging behavior? We went over how we can understand what's going on with our child, some coping strategies for families, helping with online school, how to deal with a tantrum, and also there'll be more information in the handout. So if you have any questions, I would be happy to answer them. If the questions are of a personal or sensitive nature, I'm also open to speaking with you in private as well. Thank you. That's it. Thanks, Niru.
Thanks, Ish. That was actually really, really helpful. As Ishanthi mentioned, there's a handout that she has prepared, and I think we'll post that onto the chat box. It's been posted onto the chat box now. You can download it. We will now go into the question and answer time. Like I mentioned at the start, if you want to pose your question privately or anonymously, you can do so. Just type the question up into the chat box that's on your right-hand side and select which of the panelists you want the question to go to. So where it says everyone, just click up that tab and it'll have the participants. So I just select Ishanthi's or Vanessa's name and send it to them directly. All right, we have about 15 minutes, I think, for questions, maybe 20 at most. So let's kick started. Maybe Ishanthi, if there's a question that's come your way, you can start off with it.
I have a question here. It's about, let me see. Okay. It's about online school. So anyways, we went over some strategies that you can use. So my information, you can always access my information, my contact information from the OGA. Try some of the strategies that we used, that I had mentioned. It sounds like there's been something's happening in the family as well. So sometimes it's important for us to allow things to settle down, and then we might see strategies working. Let me see. Vanessa, do you have a question?
No, I don't.
No. Okay, so Ishanthi, maybe you can take that.
Okay, so there's one. Given the hours of online school during COVID, how much additional screen time do you recommend for an 8-year-old? So there's 4 hours of schooling happening. I'm guessing this is probably in the morning. So maybe an additional hour in the afternoon, right? Not too much, of course, but like I said, maybe we can even use screen time as a means to connect with family. So this won't be just sitting in front of the phone watching something. We'll be talking to a grandparent, maybe talking to a cousin, something like that, right? How do you cope with screen time? Control. So this is actually where schedules come into play. So if we can make a schedule, we can actually see, okay, how much time is being spent on certain activities. And then, we can explain, instead of saying, no, you can't have screen time, you can say, explain to them, screen time is bad for your eyes, screen time is bad for our health, too much of it. So we need to give our eyes a break. Let's include, let's say, different kind of activities that we can do instead of screens. So a lot of the time, this also goes to positive attention from parents. If they're not getting attention from you, then they need to numb that by just watching something. So maybe if you can sit with your child and play with Lego, teach them how to make something, maybe you can go back to it and say, look, why don't you continue playing with this? Maybe it could be puzzles, right? Start making a puzzle, get them to finish it. We as parents sometimes have to sit and play with our children first for them to even begin to get a liking for certain activities. Something that if parents are having problems with the screen time, something that y'all can Google actually is this term called closed-ended activities. So closed-ended activities are activities that have a beginning and an end. These are applied to younger children as well as to older children, right? So these are activities that don't require too much imagination. You look at the box, you look at the activity, you know exactly what to do. You just have to get them to do it, right? Once it's incorporated into a schedule, they will see, right, it's not that, I'm not ever going to get screen time anymore. I just have to wait for this time slot and then I'll get it again, right? So let's see. She spoke about something. Okay. Vanessa, anything on your side?
Yes, I have a question here.
Mm-hmm.
If both parents are not in the same page in relation to the strategies mentioned, what are some of the tips to manage these dynamics? It's a very good question. If both parents are not on the same page in relation, okay, what are some of the tips to manage these dynamics, especially with young children? I think coming into agreement is very important, because what can happen is that if the parents don't agree, the child will run to the other parent who does agree with the child. And so the parents actually have to act as a team. And if you don't agree, it's so important that you don't voice that out in front of the child. So some of these conversations have to happen in private, and you have to come into an agreement. You have to meet in the middle. And this sometimes means that we have to let go of our ideas that we hold on to. So some parents I know, for example, are fine with a lot of screen time, sweets. I know one parent might not agree with consequences, and the other parent wants to see these things happen. So it's so important to have that conversation. And Ishanthi rightly said, do not bring these arguments in front of the child. Do not show the child that you don't agree. And when you're coming to agreement, you will have to compromise a little bit, but it's so important that you all are on the same page with many of these strategies. Ishanthi, anything to add there?
No, I think that was perfect. Thanks, Vanessa. There's one over here that I have. Do you have any advice on how to be supportive towards a child with a language problem? My 8-year-old is not fluent in Sinhala, so she's not responding to tuition as well. Okay, so what we have to keep in mind over here is that now 8-year-old meaning, I'm assuming she's in grade 3, right? So the classes are geared to a child who has the prerequisite knowledge for grade 3. So it's important that when the child is doing tuition, or you have said here that the child is not responding to tuition as well. If the tuition teacher is also trying to get her to meet her at a grade 3 level, this is not going to work because she doesn't have any of the prerequisite skills to get there. So then you will need to kind of go back a little bit, maybe even start from grade 1. You know, it doesn't matter, right? Meet the child where the child's level is at and bring her up from there. Right, I'm trying to think grade 3, there's quite a bit of comprehension. Even I have a son, he's also in grade 3. They do a lot of, writing, and by that time the child has to be knowing all their pillang, and they need to write on their own. So it's a lot. Grade 1, actually, there's a lot of foundation work that is done. So if your child has missed out on that or didn't pay much attention in grade 1, of course, they would struggle in grade 3. So my advice is go back a few years, get some of the foundation work done again. Maybe you did it, and maybe they just didn't listen. These are small kids, right? So just redo that and then try and build the child's confidence around this subject, and I'm sure slowly she will catch up. There's a lot of questions here actually about screen time, right? So something, some advice I can give you. Now, Vanessa is also a parent. I'm also a parent, how much screen time? Look, this is a hard time for all of us, okay? If we are unable to spend time with our child, and screens are the only other option we have to keep them safe. Our mental health matters first, right? Our mental health matters first. Our mental health and safety trumps everything else. Okay, so if you're struggling with your work and you're struggling with everything, and a screen is the only way you can get your kids to be quiet, it's okay, right? It's fine. It's hopefully this is just for a short period of time. Once things settle down and we can get them out of the house again, we can get them on a more healthier schedule, right? I don't want to be here and stress a parent who's already stressed out by saying, no, that's too much screen time. Obviously, you're giving your child this device because you don't have any other option, right? So if things are difficult, and if you're stressed at work and you're stressed at home and the kids are shouting and there's nothing else you can do, it's fine, right? Vanessa, do you have anything to add to that?
I would only add, just like Ishanthi said earlier, you can always use screen time to make it a meaningful learning experience. So for example, with my 3-year-old the other day, which we watched Finding Nemo. And what I did afterwards was we created a poster full of animals that he saw in the movie. So starfish and seahorse and all of these things. So I just use that experience to make it a meaningful learning opportunity for him. And that is something that we can do because, like Ishanthi was saying, we have to be realistic. And we have to sometimes take it a day at a time. There are things that, for example, a show that starts and ends, that is something that's good as opposed to watching something like Cartoon Network or whatever, where the cartoons just continue and continue and continue and continue and continue. You can always say, okay, we're going to watch a movie or we're going to watch this program, which has a start and an end. So when the end comes, the child knows. The other thing that helps me with my son is that 5 minutes before the program is going to end, I start to prepare him for that. I start saying, okay, the show is going to end soon. And when it ends, we're going to put the TV off. Prepares him as opposed to suddenly being like, okay, now let's put the TV off, stop, because that's going to bring out a tantrum. So kind of preparing them for, okay, now it's going to end. So you can always use screen time for something that's meaningful, just an experience that, they can either build their vocabulary, learn a new concept. So I know that screen time helped my son to start counting and learn numbers. That was something that helped him because of the songs and, using his fingers. So relax, take it a day at a time. And like Ishanthi said, your mental health is very important. So sometimes if it goes a little longer, it's okay. Just try and see how you can make it meaningful as opposed to them just sitting in front of a screen.
I have one over here about, again, online school, not paying attention, not writing down their notes. Maybe you can talk to your child about why. So instead of, so it's something about what Vanessa said. So instead of talking at your child, maybe just have a conversation about what's going on, what's the problem over here. Is it that you don't understand? Try and, it is one of the behaviors that we do see as changes due to this pandemic. And if we were to be too punishing with them, it's just going to sour your relationship with the child. So try and have a conversation around why this is happening. And, one of the strategies you can use is, let's say if they do 3 subjects a day, maybe just say, look, just for the one subject, write down 3 things that you learned, right? Start small. And then gradually we can kind of get to the whole day's work. Anything, Vanessa, you wanted to say for that?
No.
No.
There's a question here. What homeschooling schedule or activities do you follow for your 3-year-old? So my son does have online classes for about half an hour to 40 minutes. It depends on the activities. If the activities, so he's not much of he doesn't like to write much as yet, and he's still small, so that's fine by me. But if it's practical, if it involves painting, he loves it. He will sit there for half an hour with the painting. So it depends on the activity. With regards to the schedule, the homeschooling schedule, so I am a person, I don't put too much pressure. Again, I take it according to the weekly schedules because I also work and my husband works. So it's how we manage it. What I do is I write out a few worksheets and I sit with him. And again, I don't keep my phone or anything that can, notifications, it's all out. I sit with him and we practice. So what I start is, okay, let's do a little bit of writing. He doesn't like it, but then I follow that up with something that he really does enjoy, something like painting. And I think it's important to understand what your child is interested in and to use that. He's good. He likes to count. So I don't put a strict schedule because I'm just aware of managing our work schedules as well. I take it a week at a time. And I don't get him to sit for hours and end. I think as a 3-year-old, it's all about, digging into the sand, sensory play. I make little things like mixing baby oil and flour and making moon sand. So he keeps, because all that matters in their learning. It is not just sitting with a pen and paper. At that age, it's all about sensory exposure, getting them to play with water. I actually include him in a lot of housework. So he waters the plants, he makes pancakes with me, and using those experiences, what I do is I bring in a little bit of numbers, a little bit of those key concepts. So like, is this heavy or is this light? Can we cut the apple into half? Can you, watering the plants, this is a big pot, so we have to put a little bit more water in it. So I use those experiences to kind of engage him in that learning as well. So I think it's important that we can look at those little opportunities, even if it is, even if it is some housework, there's always something that they can learn through that, some of those key concepts that we can build in. Ishanthi, over to you.
Yeah, I have one over here. Other than online school, kids engage in a lot of other extracurricular activities, again, online, such as singing, basketball, art, piano, and so on. Is this recommended where they have a lot of online engagements, even though they're positive ones? So again, it's a bit of a catch-21, right? Like what do you do? So there are these activities that only can be offered online. There's no other option for these service providers, right? So so like you said, these are positive online engagements. So it's important that we balance those out with other physical activities that they can do at home. So now when it comes to basketball, they don't have to stare at the screen the entire time. My daughter also does basketball. So it's they can just look just for a moment, but they don't have to keep looking. Even when it comes to art, you just look to see what the teacher is asking you to do, but then you can look back at your work. So maybe not to keep the screen right where they can see, to keep it at maybe a higher elevation where they just have to look for a brief moment and then look back down at their work, something like that. I have another one here, how to manage online schooling while parents are working from home. Now, this is actually a problem for many families, right? You're working from home, your child has to do school. What do you do? Something that I have suggested, which has worked for many families, is for all of you all to be in that same space, right? But maybe all of you all would need those headsets because one person speaking might disturb the other person. Once the class is over, try and schedule your breaks around their breaks that you can just ask. So how was it? What did you all learn? Sometimes children want to talk about it, sometimes they don't. But that's okay, just to kind of check in with them. If for your work you need to leave the house, maybe call them when you know the class is over and just ask, so how was it? What did the teacher say? If they did a quiz, pay attention to that. Ask, how did you do? If they didn't do so well, say, oh, that's okay, right? Try and be supportive with those things. I have another one here. Could you?
I would also like to add. Sorry, Ishanthi.
No, go ahead. Sorry.
I just wanted to add that, if if it's a real struggle, you can always communicate to the teachers, because as educators, we are very aware of the struggle that parents are going through. And some of the kids I work with, there are 4 in the family, and managing the timetables has become a real struggle. So I would suggest have a honest conversation with the teachers, tell them where the struggle is, and look at options such as, where like days where there's no other way. Can the child listen to the recording? If you need an extension on homework, again, have those conversations. Sometimes teachers don't know. They don't know what each family is going through, and especially with isolation and quarantine, COVID hitting families as well. I would suggest just have those conversations, just an honest conversations with the teachers.
I have one here. Could you briefly explain the difference in lockdown experience for an only child who's below the age of 10 with no siblings in the house to play with and so on? How can we handle that kind of experience? So this is where it's really important to pay positive attention to this child, right? And also to have a schedule where you can incorporate time, meaningful time with your child and doing meaningful activities. So a child, now you said under 10, so I'm not really sure how old the child is, but maybe you can teach the child Scrabble, right? But not the way Scrabble is played, where you randomly pick letters out, but maybe you can keep all the letters open and ask the child to just pick whatever they can use. Modify games for them to understand, right? You've got Ludo, you've got snakes and ladders. Maybe you all can include the child in cooking. Maybe dad can include the child in the gardening. Try and get them involved in as many house chores as possible. Of course, parents, you include a child in an activity, it takes an hour longer, but that's okay. It's time spent together. That's what you have to always think. Not, oh my goodness, this is taking so long. You have to think, no, I'm spending time with him or her. We're getting our work done as well. It's a positive experience, right? So try that and see. Anything that you want to add, Vanessa, to that?
Yeah, my son is the only child. He's 3 years old. So we spend time with him. We engage with him a lot. And what we try to do is we make sure dad has time with him and I have time with him. And we do simple things that he likes. It actually isn't mind-blowing things. Sometimes, just playing with stones and sand and, so it's really important that they get your attention and your time. We can't spend a lot of time with him, but when we do, we try to make sure that we are there, like we are present. I just want to add something also about screen time. We think that our kids have to be occupied all the time, but now psychologists are saying, emphasizing also on the importance of sometimes them being bored, because being bored stimulates creativity. And we, as parents, sometimes we feel bad. We think that they shouldn't be bored, but boredom is important. It's even important for us adults because we're constantly stimulated by screens. So, for example, my niece has picked up chess just out of boredom. She took the board, she took the pieces, and she started, learning chess. My nephew has started drawing, and I think he's surprised by his own artistic skills. But this is all due to them being bored and their parents just giving them the space to figure it out. So don't put pressure on yourself like, oh, my child is bored, I need to entertain them. We don't always have to entertain our kids. So a little bit of boredom is actually healthy. So I just wanted to leave that with you all. Ishanthi, you have any more questions?
I do. I have one here. My son spends majority of time with his grandparents. I would like him to get him started on homeschooling and a particular schedule, but no one in the house thinks that that's important. So over here, it's really important that you get him on a schedule. That's something that maybe you can talk to your family about. Maybe they don't want him to be on a schedule the whole day. So maybe you can talk to them and come up with a compromise. Okay, let's get him to be on a schedule during part of the day at least, right? Now, you haven't mentioned how old your child is over here, but sometimes, especially grandparents, I find they don't, things have changed, right? Expectations in schools have changed as well. So, Vanessa has kids, I have kids. I'm sure, when I was very surprised when my daughter had to go to grade 1 and she had to know so many things. And of course, when my son went to school, I was a bit more prepared, right? They need to know to read, they need to basically be exposed to these two subjects, their mother tongue as well as English. They need to be able to sit for an extended period of time. They need to be able to attend to their work. They need to have proper, these terms like joint attention. They need to have all these things that they learn in school. So kids who have not gone to school for this 1 year have missed out on those prerequisite skills, right? So if your child is 3 or 4 and they're kind of playing the whole day, this is going to be very difficult when they do go back to school. Now, I'm sure teachers will make allowances to try and, get everyone used to coming back to school. But, there are these curriculums that our teachers have to stick to, right? So there's not too much time we can spend to help our kids adjust because there is still work to do. Schedules are really important for us to kind of isolate certain skills. What is it that we want to teach them? Well, I'm going to incorporate that into this and get them to do it. So that's something that maybe you can try. Have a schedule for part of the day and not the whole day. Give the play parts to maybe the grandparents so that then they can feel happy that, okay, my child, this child is playing. But, you have to be a little bit careful. Like if it's a schedule and you want someone who is not interested to actually implement it, then you're taking away value and respect for the schedule in itself. And then if you want to implement that later, the child themselves may not have any kind of respect for this schedule. So in that situation, I would say, try it when you can. When you are at home, you get it done. And don't hand it over to someone who won't do it anyway. Hope that makes sense. Vanessa, you want to add anything to that?
No, Ishanthi, I think that was
okay.
great.
So sorry to cut in. I think we are reaching sort of the end of the webinar. Hi, Vanessa. Yeah, we have questions actually we have time rather for one. And I'm just going to give this question to both of you because I feel that this is a really important question. It's coming to me directly, but I think it's something that I really like the two of you to address. It's a topic by itself, but I'd like you to touch on it. And the question is, do you totally disagree with physical punishment for an uncontrollable child? The question that has come in is, do you totally disagree with physical punishment for an uncontrollable child? I'd really like both of you to sort of touch on it if possible. I know it's a very vast topic, but just before we wrap up, maybe Vanessa, you can go first.
So I think this is again to do with perspective. We need to understand why is there uncontrollable behavior, because there are different ways of looking at that. What is uncontrollable behavior to me might be something, might not be the same to Ishanthi. So it's kind of important to, so it's kind of important to understand what that uncontrollable is and why it is so. Children are not born bad. They're not bad. There are circumstances that either frustrate them or anger them. Sometimes they need to be taught on how to communicate that frustration a bit more appropriately. So there are certain things now when we talk about punishment, we actually should look at it as a consequence. And the issue with physical punishment is that what is a consequence that it's teaching the child? Normally with physical consequence, the child forgets what he did bad or what he did wrong, but he'll remember the physical consequence. He'll remember the pain, the shock. So that's why you kind of have to look at it long-term as well, because it is not just punishing the child at that moment for that behavior. It is also about teaching the child self-discipline and taking responsibility. So physical punishment doesn't really sort any of that out. Physical punishment will punish through pain, and what it is indicating is control. So the parent is physically punishing for control. Consequences instead is you are giving the child a consequence directly for that behavior. So uncontrollable behavior, I mean, it can be anything. It can be shouting, it can be throwing, it can be damaging and not listening. You know, it can be any of those. So it's really important to identify, okay, what is it that has triggered the behavior? Why is the child acting out? What is the trigger? And what we normally suggest to parents is that take a preventative approach, because often when you're observing your child, you can see it coming on, right? You can see it coming on. You can see your child beginning to, you know, either get angry or something. And that's when you actually intervene. So we actually intervene before, or we try to intervene before that that tantrum or whatever it is that takes place. And so we take a preventative approach, which is a proactive approach. We teach the child, okay, this is inappropriate. So even if you get angry, now say the child is lashing out because the child gets angry, we don't tell the child, don't get angry. We all get angry. Anger is an emotion. But what is an inappropriate and appropriate way of managing that anger? So when you get angry, we don't throw things, we don't hit. Instead, what can we do? What would you like to do at that time? So, you know, with regards to special education, we have different ways for children to manage their anger. Sometimes we give them stress balls, just squeeze. Sometimes we give them something to hold on to. Sometimes they blow into something just to get that energy out. So it's important, what is it and what are you trying to teach your child? So I don't recommend physical punishment, because it's just teaching the child that, you know, dad and mom is bigger than me, they're hitting me. And he will only remember that. Very rarely do they remember, okay, what did I do wrong? They will often remember what the punishment was and how that felt. And what you're going to be creating is a teenager, or as they get older, they're not going to be, they're going to begin to hide from you. They're going to begin to lie because they're doing it to avoid punishment.
So my take on that is
Whereas
similar.
when you think about consequences, so for example, you break.
Vanessa,
I think your mic is on mute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'll unmute. Okay. So what you are teaching is, say if they break something, if it's an older child, you can have that conversation where, okay, you break it, you're going to put it back together. Or you're going to use your pocket money to replace it. Now, my 3-year-old draws on the wall. The consequence is you make a mess, you clean it up. And he'll stand there for a good 10 minutes, rubbing it all out. But he's learning the connection between I make a mess, I clean it up. So that's the benefit of teaching a consequence as opposed to a punishment. Ishanthi, anything from your end?
Yeah, so my take on that is similar and different. So I have slightly older children, and I've, you know, as much as I like to, you know, use conversation and, you know, functional communication and all of that, there have been times when I've had to give them a shot now and then, but I make sure that it is the, you know, the last consequence. So they just didn't listen. This is the final thing. Now mama is really mad. right? And they know when they are escalating me, and I give them those signs so that they know I am getting very angry now, right? And like I remember when my son was younger, he would even tell his sister, Akka, now Amma is talking, Mama is talking without opening her mouth. I'll say, what did you do? Like that. And then like, you know, then he would say, Mama is getting really angry now. So I would give them those signs. Look at me, read me, so that you know how to de-escalate the situation yourself, right? So, you know, I'm not trying to put the message that you need to hit your kids, but, you know, when it comes to disciplining children, it's only up to us. There's no one else to discipline our children, right? No one else will, right? Our teachers are really not there to discipline them. They're there to educate them, right? And things have changed a lot now. There's been a lot of, you know, things have gone too far. Parents have complained too much. Teachers don't take on the role of disciplining anymore, right? It's up to parents. So it's important that we have good parenting strategies where we can come to a point where we don't need to, you know, physically do anything with our children. Maybe you can, if you find that you're doing it more often than you would like, maybe you can speak to someone about it to get more specific strategies, or like situation specific strategies that can help you out. I hope that answer was helpful. Niru?
Yeah, it does actually. Thank you. Thank you. Unfortunately, it's 7 o'clock and we're going to have to wrap this up, even though some questions have come in. We will try and address those questions through email. If there are additional questions, maybe you can email it to the address that we have on our flyer. That's lcojaevents@gmail.com. Thanks, Ishanthi and Vanessa. This was extremely, extremely informative, especially for me as a parent. I'm sure everyone else on this forum has similar sentiments. Before I wrap up, like I said at the start, this is what we hope is one of a series. So if any of the participants on this forum have any ideas or like topics that they want to see us cover in the future, please feel free to email us. The email is lcojaevents@gmail.com. It's on the flyer, and we will consider that. Again, thank you, Ishanthi. Thank you, Vanessa. And we hope all of you have a good night.
Thanks for having us.
All right.
Thank you.
Care.
Good night.
Right.
Good night, everyone.
Good night. Bye.